This episode is sponsored by McKelvey Insurance Group. If you've ever felt confused or overwhelmed by insurance, McKelvey Insurance Group keeps it simple. They're an independent agency, which means they compare options from multiple providers to find coverage that actually fits you, not just one company's policy. No pressure, no jargon, just honest guidance and real help. You can get a quick quote or a policy review at mckelveyins.com or call 618-623-0080. Thanks to McKelvey Insurance Group for supporting the show. This episode is sponsored in part by Light Source Psychotherapy. If anxiety, panic, trauma, sleep issues, or big life transitions have you feeling stuck, their team works with kids, teens, adults, couples, and families in Belleville, Illinois, through teletherapy or even walk and talk outdoors. Evidence-based care like CBT, DBT, EMDR, and more, built around what matters most to you. Learn more and book at findyourlightsource.com.
We're here, episode 5. Needed to hear that with my man Chaz and all his wisdom.
My man Pondoff.
There you go.
And all his wisdom.
Yeah. Just on piggybacking off of a recording we just did with my friend Teresa, who I think you've heard of and finally kind of met in person.
Yeah, I just
right?
got to meet her.
Lost his sister 8 years ago. Just on February 12th was the 8-year anniversary. So she spoke at Underground, gave her story. She's been on the podcast in 2020, dear friend. She's starting to get that call, like, to serve this community. And she's full of empathy and kindness and humanity. And then lose somebody to this, like, it's impossible to not wind up somehow in or adjacent to this vacuum of people.
Yeah.
And I always say in recovery, but really where she's probably most gifted is the people that have yet to find it, that are seeking.
Mm-hmm.
I bring that up though because we talked a lot about her grief journey, and you and I, we touch on grief probably every
time.
They say when you talk about something kind of over and over, it's usually important. And they told me that. They told me that when I was like, if the professor, I didn't do too well in college, if the teacher in high school says something, it might be on the test.
Right. Well, and you'll hear me say every now and then that all therapy is grief work. You know, there's loss in every change. And when you get into working on therapeutic stuff, when you get into working on your inner life, when you get into working on spirituality, you end up processing loss and grieving something from maybe a trauma point of view. That grief can be, you might be grieving a childhood, you might be grieving a safe parent, a safe adult, you might be grieving opportunities, but yeah, it's, and when I've given certain talks and spoken to other therapists, when I say that, all therapy is grief work, what ends up happening is that's the most likely time that somebody's going to come up to me afterward and be like, I've always said that. I've always thought there was grief in every session or grief in every conversation, because, like, loss is a central part of the human experience, because our impermanence is a central part to the human experience. We know we're not here forever. And so every time something expires, it impacts our existence.
When I think you talked about this a little bit when you guest spoke at Underground about, like what you're saying, even losing a job or changing a job there's a shift and a loss of something. I know we talked about losing our beloved pets, Diego, Little Wos, and Bristol, to name the 3 that we've talked about, and how that's a really uncomplicated, pure grief.
Yeah.
So we've talked about it a lot. We talked about the Death Cafe, which you have coming up on Thursday. This will be dropped by then, but the third Thursday of every month.
Yeah, third Thursday of every month, 6 to 8 at Pour Coffee Shop. The the nature of even talking about loss and talking about grief, like you mentioned, losing a job, kind of circling back to that. Like there's a concept. The original book would have been written by a guy, I believe, named Kenneth Joka, Joka, who wrote a book on disenfranchised grief. And it's kind of just like these different processes of mourning that aren't recognized by whatever culture you're in. So, and ambiguous loss is another form, another kind of term adjacent to that, which is from a woman named Pauline Boss. But these are things, especially like the loss of a job, also loss of pet, even a miscarriage, where they're not widely accepted forms of mourning. Right. Even though
don't even get bereavement for that.
No, not at all. No way. And so that when we bring in a discussion like addiction, or we bring in loss associated with addiction, you start seeing how much that overlaps with a lot of these disenfranchised forms of loss, these ambiguous losses. An ambiguous loss, if you think about the like ACA, adult children, like there's a lot of like what's considered psychological absence as an ambiguous loss, like having a parent who is
fucking
struggling
Ashley's
with addiction.
read half of that book.
It's a great book. Man.
I told Ashley, I go, there's people that have been going to this class for 20 years and haven't read the whole book.
It's a great
book.
book.
For 3 weeks and you're fucking halfway through it.
Get that big red book.
And it's big.
It's an undertaking for sure, but pardon the lost joke. It's an undertaking. But
I just heard his music.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I mean it's a great book, but there's a lot of ambiguous loss that goes into that discussion of if abandonment is an ambiguous loss,
We talked about when Teresa and things that people say, like she was talking about going, her and her sister, I mean, El Monstero, Pink Floyd was their shit. They would go to every show, and how every show since has been hard she goes, but it's obviously there's this loss. And a lot of she'll get all the platitudes. She wants you to be there. She wants you happy. So get happy. So what that person is usually saying is she wants you there happy. So put a fucking smile on so I don't have to be uncomfortable in your grief.
Yeah.
We are very uncomfortable. I think a lot of us that haven't been through some trauma or dealt with the trauma we've been through that are very uncomfortable around other people's grief. So they're going to give you 3 days. If it's real close to death, you get 3 days from work. Maybe a year. Yeah. Better not lose 2 people.
Oh no. And we don't give it to ourselves either.
Yeah.
I mean, when my grandma died when I was working in the prison, my mom's mom, who I adored.
Yeah, the good one. Right?
Yeah, she was amazing. And
gave you the cookies?
She gave me whatever I wanted. I like so much. Both of my grandmas were amazing, but when I lost my mom's mom, I was new in the field, and there is a very disorienting aspect of losing someone when you are still in a phase of life where you still feel you have a little bit of immortality ahead of you. Like it's tough. Like I was in my 20s, a new therapist,
and I knew everything in my 20s.
Yeah, and so
I was invincible.
I remember they gave me. I know I came back one day before I had to work, and by my choice. Nobody's putting pressure on me. Nothing. Like I just was like, I'll go in Friday. And I'm working on that Friday, and even kind of oblivious to until the moment I'm like, I'm so sad. It's such a weird kind of almost a hopefulness that this thing happened and that life will come back to some form of normal quickly. So I go back to work probably on a Friday. Like probably took off Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and went back on a Friday. And then in a moment of just sitting in a room going, why did I come to work today? My grandma died 5 days ago. A beloved, safe adult in my life. And what do I do after a couple of days off? I go, well, I should go back to work. And so when other people project that, when other people say, well, gosh, what did you say, Teresa was 8 years?
Yeah, so her sister Michelle was 8 years. February 12th was the 8-year anniversary of her death.
Oh, my God. So last week was
right.
the anniversary. Okay.
Brings up all kinds of fucking shit.
The anniversaries matter.
Mm-hmm.
The anniversaries matter. And
I mean, I got them tattooed on my, anybody that dies, that they usually, those are my tattoos. I got John Gibson's death date, Tom's, Bristol's.
Yeah.
You go on. If you don't want me tattooing you on my.
No, it's a bad omen. It's definitely the memorializing things, those anniversaries. And it's not the anniversaries really, you realize the significance of loss when you realize how many dates matter. When you start to be like, this is 8 years. And actually, January 12th was 8 years ago was the last time I talked to her on the phone.
Right.
And February 1st was the last time I got a text from her. And, and that November before was the last time we went to El Mostero. Like, as you work with grief, as you work with loss and you memorialize these dates, you don't come to realize that 8 years ago on February 12th, is this penultimate day. You realize that there were countless days that were worthy of memorializing. You just didn't know you were going to memorialize them at the time. You just didn't know the last time that you did something was going to be the last time. So then as you get to that first year, if you think about a lot of grief work, so back to David Kessler and Bob Niemeyer, there's a lot of discussion of the second year after a loss being really, really hard, because the first year you're kind of in a fog.
Sure.
And you have, like if you have somebody, if you lose, you go through a significant loss in October. Well, the holidays are going to be weird, but they're a fog. It's the next holidays when you've had a full year and you're back to work and you're back to whatever.
There's an empty chair at the table.
Ooh, that's going to be,
stirring meatballs and.
Yeah. It's going to be a whole different ballgame.
Making a play. Oh, that's the way he wanted 6 meatballs, not 3.
Yeah. I mean, those days start to really
That's
matter.
a good point. I would tell you year 2, after Tom was, and year 1, there's people are still loving on you.
Yeah,
which feels good, and they got to get back. I mean, a lot of them, once the wake's over, you better get back.
Yeah,
hell of a tab at Fisher's that day.
I believe that.
Bacon wrapped chicken livers.
Fisher's, huh?
Yeah, that's where we had the luncheon.
I
don't remember much.
I'll tell a funny grief story with Fisher's.
Please.
So my grandma that I just mentioned was a hairdresser.
Oh.
She had a beauty salon, and
Teresa.
I have attributed a lot of my real passion for relationship and people and moving towards being a therapist. I attribute a lot of it to growing up around a hairdresser, growing up around somebody who had very, very long-term relationships with people. She took care of, and they talked about everything.
Boundaryless conversations.
They talked about everything. And so my grandma had her own little salon, 2 chairs.
Oh, really?
2 chairs and 2 wash basins, for shampoo and stuff, and then 4 dryers.
For the perms.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Grandma could set a perm. And Grandma Grandma cut hair with a straight razor.
Oh, boy.
Old school. Yeah. Real. I mean, everybody does that as skilled. I don't have hair. Grandma used to ask me, since she lived into my adulthood and I had a beard, she'd say, I never understood why you wanted to cover your face, but not your head. But Grandma told me one day, very nonchalant, she said, well, did you hear that Inez Fisher died? And I'm like, and that's who owned Fisher's Restaurant here in Belleville. And I'm like, no, I didn't know that. And of course, I had known Inez in some form or fashion my whole life because she'd been getting her hair cut.
I think Inez's daughter is one of our clinical workers here at IRC.
Oh, really? Oh, my God.
Barb.
So Inez had passed, and my grandma was like, yeah, Inez died. I'm like, oh, that's sad. Again, like I'm a young person that doesn't know how to speak about any kind of grief or loss. And Grandma goes, I guess that means I'm retired. That's the last head of hair I was cutting.
Oh,
and it's just like
boy,
the commitment to relationship that grandma had, that the only people that you had to die to get off the books.
Right. I mean, that's,
like
good customer retention.
Yeah. I mean, everybody was there. She said, yeah, that Inez passed. That's the last head of hair I was doing. So I guess I'm retired now. And that was it. I mean, grandma had,
the hairstylists and bartenders were like the OG therapists.
I mean, a lot of listening.
Yeah, well, not necessarily in John Haggerty's case. It was my bartender. He did a lot of talking.
Yeah. Well, it goes, reciprocity matters.
Sure. So it's funny, though, but Teresa and I got to know each other because, believe it or not, I have a hairstylist. She's my hairstylist. And I started seeing her couple weeks out of treatment because I went to stay at my mom's, not back at the house in Belleville with Varner, where we were matching each other plastic jug for plastic jug of alcohol. Good decision on my part to stay with Kathy. Sure. Somewhat a sober living environment.
Good decision to get sober. Yeah. In general, recovery was a good idea.
And up the street was hair salon for men. She's like, they have the game on. Go. They'll shine, bring up your loafers. They'll shine. They do a shoe shine. It was really kind of cool. So I went up and finally got to Teresa, and we instantly hit it off, and she's been ever since. And I, early on in our relationship, shared my story with recovery, and her sister Michelle was a in and out of active addiction. And then she lost her sister while we were together, and we've been just really close, and ever since. And now, she's been on the podcast twice now, and spoken underground about her sister Michelle, and keeping her light shining by talking about her. Because one of the things we hit on, I wanted to talk to you about tonight, as we're talking about grief, is how society receives it a little bit. But in her case, in Michelle's case, she lost her life to what the autopsy report would probably call a overdose. Mm-hmm. Flip side, I sat down for coffee Friday morning with a warrior of a mom whose 13-year-old son, long story short, went over to a friend's house. The grown-ups in the room were all fentanyl addicts. And stepdad's friend were fentanyl addicts. Mom was a meth addict. There was powder out. The friend and this mom's son decided to try it, thinking it was cocaine. It was fentanyl. Son died.
Oh my God.
Friend overdosed, survived, had to testify. The grown-ups in the room are all doing life for child endangerment resulting in death. And she told me that my son died of a fentanyl poisoning. And I was talking to Teresa on the episode just before this, that because I think we both agree that her sister knew how to use heroin. Mm-hmm. She was in and out, a heroin addict. She died of carfentanil poisoning. And when you change that word, overdose, to poisoning, mm-hmm. people react differently in the community.
Sure.
Even in the emergency room. If you go in, if I rush you into the emergency room and said, hey, Chaz is having an overdose, how are you received versus, hey, I need help, Chaz is poisoned. He's been poisoned.
Sure, yeah. Totally different term.
And we kind of unpack that, like the way society responds to, if somebody young dies, people want to know how did he or she die? Was it an overdose? Yeah. Because they're so uncomfortable with. Not everybody's meaning to be an asshole.
Not at all.
But it's something about this fear, maybe, of our own mortality. I do it. I'm like, oh, somebody young died. Was it a mental health? Was it drug overdose? That's usually the first two that you go to, right?
Yeah.
And so I think society as a whole is. And you say we do it to ourselves. You're back to work at a prison. You're not like slinging drinks at a beach. Like, I better get back to work. You're going.
We have there's a strange, like the prosecution, I don't know a lot about some of the processes of like prosecuting people that provided the drugs for an overdose or something like that, or even for a poisoning, if that's the term. I hadn't heard that before. That's really interesting. There was there was somebody that spoke at a conference that I was at who is in the legal field.
Okay.
And she was wonderful. This is nothing against her. But she went into a whole process of a big ring of like fentanyl dealers that she had been instrumental in breaking up and arresting. And there was also a couple of kind of low level dealers that had kind of knowingly sold some stuff to somebody who overdosed and died. And so everybody goes to prison in this story. And I was at this conference. Well, everybody at the conference is a therapist, counselor, treatment provider of some kind, right? You don't have any legal,
right.
You don't have any lawyers, you don't have any law enforcement in the room. And you watch as people are kind of like cheering on certain aspects of the incarceration, and they're excited that this got busted up, which I totally understand. But I'm also sitting there being like, the 28 faces that she just put up on the screen that all are in the throes of addiction, in the world of addiction, those are the people that we're going to be serving. The longest sentence on the screen that she showed was 26 years to somebody that's 28 years old.
Yeah.
So you have a list of people who are also in this world, who are also in their own throes of addiction. And I'm watching a room full of compassionate providers. We're all on the edge of our seats, kind of rooting against the villain. Yeah. When it's like, no, I mean, those are also the people that are in this world that are going to eventually make their way for help, for reentry, for
social
follow-up.
services.
Yeah. And so this idea of like, how do you spread empathy and compassion in a more kind of blanket sense? Well, some of it is who's the most impacted, right? So if you look at Teresa, or you look at the mom that you're talking about, it would be difficult to expect them to necessarily grieve the life or the livelihood of people that played a role in the death of their loved one.
She said it as much Friday morning. She's like, I will never forgive.
Yeah, because the shorthand for that is we would say that you're always coming from a place of pain.
Yeah.
Right? In that. Don't need it. I don't know who wouldn't.
Right, sure.
Right? Like,
well, the whole time I'm thinking of my 12-year-old Charlie. Just a 13-year-old. Like, it is, and this is just in, Washington, Missouri. It's not in New York or LA. You always want these things to be far away. It's in our back fucking.
Yeah. I mean, that idea of, dying of a fentanyl, which especially a 13-year-old, it's pretty easy to call that poisoning.
Sure. Well, and she did share, I think the lethal dose of fentanyl is 2 milligrams. Let's just say 2 milligrams, 2 to 5. And I may be having it may be less. I might be using instead of milligram, it's something less than that. I don't know. I should look it up. His number he had 44.
Oh my God.
In his system, in his toxicology report.
Wow. Yeah.
But back to the poison. I consider a dear friend who did 7 years federal time because she was a part of a situation where the drugs that her boyfriend sold resulted in a fatality, and she found recovery and celebrate recovery in a federal prison, and came on the podcast and shared, and then has re-entered and just recently got her bracelet off, her ankle bracelet off, and is, I think, now a fully free member of society, and getting married and pregnant and trying to rebuild her life, and has a therapist and a social worker. So to your point, I mean, this world of addiction is, and what people will do to feed it. For in her case, she would have gone anywhere with this guy to get high and didn't know what was going on. But it goes back to what we talked about. It went down on a rabbit hole. My bad. But what, like, the uncomfortability, whether it's somebody saying the worst thing they can ever say is, you need to get over it, which people say all the time.
You won't.
Right. Newsflash.
Yeah.
Just because if somebody tells me to get over it, I'm not gonna.
If you do, let me know.
Or the, time will heal all, and it's usually good intention.
Yeah, of course.
But it's people that are so uncomfortable with.
Most of the stigma around it and everything is this discomfort, right? It's unsettling to think about these losses, to think about the ultimate fear being real for certain people, right? Like to think of a parent talking about losing a 13-year-old.
Yeah, it's not the way it's supposed to go.
To think of a sibling losing a sibling,
right.
To think of losing a partner, like that's terrifying. And one of the unfortunate ways that our mind tries to make sense of it is by trying to find the through line of like, oh, that's where you did it. That's where it was your fault.
Yeah.
That's where you made a mistake, and that's also. I mean,
you are wearing your seatbelt. I'll wear my seatbelt.
Yeah, there's always a seatbelt, right? There's always something that it's like, okay, cool. Like that's why that won't happen to me. Clearly, that's fear, right? Like that's not just people being cruel. I'm not saying that nobody is ever cruel or selfish.
Yeah. There's
mean, right?
Plenty of assholes.
Trying to keep it in a more assuming positive intent or hopeful direction in terms of how people approach one another. I know there are bad actors out there that just say mean, judgmental, nasty things, and I don't want to make excuses for that. But when you look at somebody who just is scared by the news, like I've said before, when somebody says, "Oh, this person is 55 and died from lung cancer," right? It's like, "Oh, they smoke?"
Yeah, right.
And
how many packs a day?
And it's like, man, it must be terrifying if that's how fast we go to that blame. And I think that one of the kind of feedback loops of addiction is there's already such a stigma against it,
right?
That also knowing that this thing that kills many, many people, countless people at this point, knowing that it's also low-hanging fruit for blame, makes it so that nobody worries about that anxiety. They go right to
the overdose.
Yeah, they go right to it. And it is a complete breakdown of compassion, because we're talking about something that is taking the life of a lot of people who they're shockingly young to die.
Right.
The
life expectancy is, not, people are in their 80s.
I mean, I've mentioned, my buddy Chris Vollmer, who's a therapist here in town, and Chris is a guy that speaks very eloquently about dealing with loss because he worked in hospice for a long time. And it's there's so many times that what he was going to talk about would be age. I mean, there's still somebody very young on hospice who may have done something like eating disorders could get you on hospice.
Drinking your liver away.
Yeah, drinking can get you on hospice. At a very young age, you could be 30 and your liver's shot. And they could put you on hospice.
Cancer patients on hospice?
Yeah, oh yeah. And so, but when you look, we look very quickly for blame, mostly because of that discomfort, mostly because of the quick control that we get for blame. And then once you have gone through your own loss, once you really have had any kind of loss, right? Like when I'm talking about disenfranchised grief, if you lost a job, suddenly your empathy is up, right? Like for people that lose job, if you lose a beloved pet, you're not going to have the same reaction when somebody says that their 17-year-old dog died, because you're going to know, my God, I was wrecked when my 15-year-old
had
dog.
a good life.
Yeah, and so
you fucking love that they say that about
Diego.
Oh
man, they love it.
He's 15. Good life.
He's 15. Oh, yeah.
You're lucky.
I told him you deserve it. It's been a long run.
Oh.
No, it's just kind of the quick way that we like that, because we like that control, because I think that knowing that once we experience every experienced loss changes us forever. And so you really don't want to start. Yeah, you don't want to start tacking those together, because you see the complications. Once you've been around for a little while and been through some losses, right? You'll start noticing that, the 15-year anniversary of this is January 28th, and the 7-year anniversary of this is February 4th. You know, like you start kind of that comes together and it crystallizes how much grief and loss just informs not just our day-to-day like coping with the grief, but how much it informs our existence in general. Like you go through a loss and go, my gosh, I've been really distracted by stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know,
Big time.
you know, and now I want to kind of realign. That's something that is a big part of the Death Cafe is some people are going to come to Death Cafe to talk about their own knowledge that they will die someday, right? Like, is this the life that I have been wanting to live now that I'm really thinking about how it's not going to go on forever?
I was just thinking about a dear friend of mine. I mean, he's been counseling the fuck out of me lately for the good. Is battling, a diagnosis that the doc said will come back. And he has this attitude: it's the best thing that's ever happened to him, and the way because it's completely shifted the way he lives his life. I don't know why he spends time counseling me, but we're still trying to figure that out.
He hasn't perfected this yet.
Sure, no. Shout out Mikey, but he. I've heard that from him. I've heard that. I mean, I even talk about. I mean, this. I heard it from Marcus Buff Bagwell from the NWO. I've been spending time with him as he's in recovery, and just electively had his leg amputated below the knee because of the excruciating pain it was in from drug-induced car accident from years ago, and it's never healed right. And he said it's the best thing that's ever happened to him, and it's like freed him from that pain and allowing him to live his life more fully. And he's going around speaking at treatment centers. He's going to come on the podcast, come out here in May. When people have gone through it, it does shift your give a fuck meter changes a little bit.
Sure. Or when
the small stuff,
when you've witnessed a loved one go through it, which is probably in a lot of ways more difficult for people,
especially codependent husbands.
A certain amount of exposure to helplessness has like a very heavy impact on us, and so
when Ashley's pristine happy, I'm in my best self.
Sure, keeping an eye on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I like her to be.
Yeah, I mean,
good and happy.
Any time, and it's one of the ways why, if you think about people that have passed from addiction, there's I'm so thankful to have met Teresa tonight, but like there's a certain degree of watching someone that you unconditionally love continue to suffer in a way that not only can you not do anything about necessarily, but you are going to probably make some decisions that are more forceful and direct than you want to, knowing that someone is suffering. And that is a very unique form of grief if you lose somebody to it. Where now, because everybody that I have ever had the honor of sitting with in therapy that has gone through a terrible loss, which is most people.
Yeah.
Right.
I was going to say, recognize that haven't.
There is, if the loss is a death related loss, right? We talk a little bit about the idea of like non-death loss, but if the loss of what somebody's grieving is someone has died or a pet has died, the amount of self-blame that person is going to go through in relation to, should I have done this? Should I have said this? I didn't get to do this. I can't believe I wasn't here for this. I can't, right? Like the inventory that we do as an individual after a loss is inevitable, first of all, right? It's not something that we do wrong. I'm not going to go right and wrong. It's not something that we do wrong. It's something that we do, right? Because it might be, oh my gosh, the last conversation I had with somebody was negative, or it might be, gosh, I didn't really spend a lot of time with grandma those last few years, right? Like, I mean, it's all very human, right? Like none of it is unique, right? Like they would say like nothing human is alien to me, right? Like if humans have gone through it, we've all gone through it. And so that when you think about addiction, a family member has very likely had to say or do or make some decisions that seemed much more, maybe even mean than they wanted to.
I see where you're going with this.
You know, and it was
Moms.
it was made out of compassion. It was not cruelty. And it might have been made out of, God forbid, if you want to talk something that can really wreck us with shame, it might have been made out of some anger.
Sure.
You know, like you're allowed to be frustrated with the behavior of other people.
Yeah, you
like we're allowed to have anger.
You know, you robbed me blind. You stole all the family jewelry to go get high. You're never allowed back in this house. And that's the last conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that you damn right. You do have, right, you could be pissed. That can.
Yeah, you're allowed to. It's a very, it's probably an important watershed moment in your life at the time, right? Like when you have to say something. I mean, just something like treatment, right? We hold these two truths in the addiction world of, we hold a belief in treatment and levels of care, and we hold an awareness that somebody will likely go through treatment a bunch of times. So whenever
interesting, yeah, that's so true.
You have to make this unbelievably difficult decision, like, I can no longer do blank unless you blank.
Right.
You know, like whatever that line in the sand is, and you make it, and then you're also aware that you might be committing to making that decision 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times, right? Like, if that person passes, right, even if it has nothing to do with addiction, right?
Sure.
I mean, people die, you know, something, right? A car accident can happen, anything.
Thinking of a woman that came on who I've gotten very close with, named Shelly Viverito. Her son, Nick, 8 months, he had 8 to 10 months clean. He spent time at Learn to Live. And she raises money, and you know Matt well, right?
Yeah,
so,
shout out to Matt.
Yeah, and he died at work 10 months after getting clean and sober from a brain aneurysm.
Yeah. And I mean,
the process, like, you know, then he dodged all these bullets, and
you're not going to experience a loss without that kind of emotional postmortem of what did I do wrong and what went wrong. That is the same thing with the non-death losses. That is the same thing with ambiguous and disenfranchised grief. Is you're going to do this reflection. Part of why I believe in a couple of things. One, I of course believe in therapy, and two, I believe in therapy that is, if necessary, has some length to it.
Sure.
You know, like if you want to be in therapy, stay in therapy. If you want to take breaks or you want to stop or whatever, of course, that's great too. But, you know, grief work, especially if you look at, I've mentioned Kessler and Bob Niemeyer, but also like Meg Devine, who wrote It's Okay, You're Not Okay. This is one of the last bastions in kind of the mental health world where you can be very person-centered and compassion-focused. Like, you're grieving, you're allowed to continue to work on your grief. Therapists believe you can continue to work on your grief, you know, like, and so there's at least people out there that give good language to the fact that grief and loss and your experience of it might shift and change, but it's not going away. And that, of course, people that are grieving anything, they don't necessarily want the grief to go away. They don't want to not be upset about the loss of someone or something they cared about. You know, that's not what most of us want to do. I couldn't say, like, you know, I couldn't ask you whether or not you would be willing to stop giving a shit about your dad in exchange for the loss of him not hurting anymore.
Yeah.
You know, like most people are not making that trade-off, but feeling that pressure of, okay, it's been a while since it happened.
We love a timeline to grief, don't we?
Yeah. and I think that's
our fetish. Yeah, we want that. You cross the checkers. The grief race is over.
There was I don't know where the interview's from, but I know that I saw somebody one time or read something sometime where they were talking to Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters.
Yeah. Got himself in a little hot water recently.
Yeah, and they had asked him if there was any aspect of Kurt Cobain's death, when Cobain died by suicide, when Cobain died.
A lot of different theories coming out on that. But let's just go with the one that's...
Yeah, I mean, the I wasn't there, but it seems Kurt Cobain suffered, it seems to be quite a bit internally. And they asked him if Cobain's death at any point had been, if he's considered it something of a bit of like a blessing, because after Kurt died, the Foo Fighters start, Dave Grohl's life becomes Dave Grohl's current life. And I don't know the quote or anything like that. I'm going from memory here. But, you know, Dave Grohl's answer was pretty much like, no, my best friend died that day. You know, like his answer was some version of like, no, that's not how that works. I lost my best friend that day. I don't need to silver lining that loss. And I think like that's that sweet spot of, if somebody says this was that my suffering in hindsight, like Buff Bagwell, if Buff Bagwell says my suffering in hindsight has made me a better person or a more complete person, great. I'm glad he says that. Do not tell other people that their suffering ought to be categorized as a blessing. Sure. You know, and that is
that's a
it sounds obvious,
what
but
is it? It's fine in the first person. But
yes. You don't tell somebody else that this is got a positive aspect to it. Because I can speak, like I said, as a therapist, I can speak for the time spent with all of the kind of complicated thoughts and shame or guilt or anger or frustration. The full gamut of emotion is going to play out through the process of grief and loss. And then it's going to be a little rinse and repeat. You know, it's going to continue. It's going to, you know, I said year 2 is going to be different than year 1. Year 5 is going to be different than year 10. But what I really want to make sure that I say to people, or that people can hear in any way, is if you are sitting there saying that it's been 48 years since so-and-so died and it still feels like it was yesterday, that is fine. Right. That is okay. That is being a human being, you know, like that is being a person. We need relationship and safety and connection. And so the severing of a physical connection is going to follow us. You know, you don't have to, I've said this before on here, there's no reason to give up a relationship with someone that you've lost. We've said it on here before. Talk to them. You know, like talk to them, have dialogues, you know, there's whole forms of models of psychotherapy that are the continued dialogues.
Anytime I see Al McInnes tweet, I think a Chopper, Tim and TP get in a little argument.
He was mad.
He's had to miss an offsides.
I will say, though, to tell everybody a quick story about Tom Pondoff that is my favorite in terms of him being funny, is the story that we keep referencing is there was definitely a year in Blues training camp where Al McInnes was on the team, and Al McInnes is a Hall of Fame hockey player. And pretty good. Tom Pondoff was reffing the camp that year, and we got to go. Pondoff and I got to go, and it was a blast. And at one point, McInnes comes off the ice, and he is not happy with the officiating in camp this far, and he's saying some choice things about the officiating. And the funniest thing is, this is Hall of Famer Al McInnes at a point in his career where he is a surefire Hall of Famer. This is not early. This is not Calgary. This is first ballot Hall of Fame Al McInnes, the leader in the locker room. And as he's getting upset with the officiating, Tom Pondoff says, "Calm down, Al. You're going to make the team." It's just a great thing to say to not most of us will not have an opportunity to shoot a smart aleck one-liner at a Hall of Fame athlete. But when Tom was like, "Calm down, baby, you're going to make the team."
Right, chill the fuck out.
It was great.
Oh, boy. Me and you were trying to dive into like an empty door.
I thought we would be in trouble. I thought Al would be like, "Are you affiliated with this? Like, you got to go."
Like fat Ridder Ruff is something that came out of his mouth.
As opposed to how Al really was. Every time the handful of times I've met Al McInnes, he just happily signed an autograph for me as a child, right?
Did he sign a chopper?
He was an unbelievably kind person every time I met him.
Don't miss an offsides on a 4-on-4 scrimmage.
Yeah, but
God.
I didn't.
By the way, that game was not for points.
No, he was on the yellow team, probably. Yeah, it's like yellow, red, blue, and white. He was probably on the yellow team.
Joel had to intervene.
Yeah.
Told Al to get in the fucking locker room.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that stuff, there's...
I want that. And when he died, Chaz, for a long time, the grief was like an acute knife in the stomach, and I would do anything for that. Like, I mean, it's like an animal that's stuck in a bear trap that would do anything to free itself. That pain was unbearable. That acute knife in the gut, carving a heart out, pain, and the only thing that would just for a second relieve it, like migraine medicine to a migraine, was whiskey.
Sure.
And for a second, and it would numb it. But I did not really start to. That knife didn't start. It didn't come out, and it was nearly 2 years. I always say 22 months after he died, that when I checked into rehab and started sleeping and then got introduced to a therapist. This isn't the one that I sent flowers to and tried to,
Your future episode on boundaries, but that's not today.
Right. Irina was her name. I started to feel and talk, and I think I had just known that way for so long was not working, that I chose to go through it. And in the knife, like the wound started, that acute wound started healing. I'm not saying that my fucking heart like put itself back together, but I was able to every once in a while find a smile again.
Sure.
But when every time I found a smile again, it's not like to your point earlier, my grief and honor to him, if you will, went diminished each time I smiled. Sure. Like me honoring him with my grief, because I would never want that bar to come down. Like, I worshiped him, so I want, and everybody better know it. Like, they know it. I'm not gonna. But if just because I'm smiling over here doesn't mean that bar is gone. I worship him less and miss him less. There's that will stay, but the pain can and will subside. It'll come back at
Yeah.
The milestones, the anniversaries, the random Tuesday, if something comes in your head or a song comes on the radio, sure. And that's one of the things that we talked about how this is not a linear process. Mm-hmm. It's not a linear process. I've learned two things about grief. It's not linear, and it does not have an end date.
No. And most work that you do, most inner work, let's say, that we do, is not linear. You don't, things stop and start, things get a little bit better. You can take a little break from working on them. We kind of scaffold some skills here and there, take a little bit of time to get a stronger foundation. But yeah, it's not linear, and it doesn't have an end date, and the pressure to give it a bit of an end date. I think sometimes what happens is we do start to ritualize a little bit. You do start to do something every year on this date, or maybe if there's a gravesite, you go visit a gravesite every year.
Love Mount Carmel, man.
Yeah, like those things start to come into play as like benchmarks in a process. And every one that we're able to do carries with it this little bit of hope that maybe then that's it, right? Like maybe we're going to leave all this suffering there, and then one more time next year, go see it again. And then when we leave, it's not there. And it's like, no, I mean, you're just kind of putting these anchor points in a process that's always going to be there. And I think, you make a great point that when Tom died, that you're in this pain that is unrelenting,
dry heaving.
Yeah, unrelenting and not going to go anywhere. And it's a vicious pain, and you can only find one particularly destructive way to make it stop in that moment. And I think that's, speaks to some of the stigma, even with addiction, when you see somebody whose response to their suffering, their particular brand of suffering, seems so destructive that all you can see is the destruction. You can't see the suffering that is in response, that it's in response to. There's a Zen Buddhist teacher named Joan Halifax, who's she wrote a book called The Fruitful Darkness and a book called Standing at the Edge. And she's done a lot of work in different areas of death and dying, and has another book called Being with Dying and a series of lectures on dying. She's a really interesting woman. And Joan Halifax has this kind of like meditation, this visualization to utilize for suffering that she utilizes with certain kinds of aggression and certain kinds of addiction and things that seem very destructive, where basically she says, picture that you're walking along and all of a sudden, kind of out of the darkness, there is a snarling dog that is like snapping at you and frothing at the mouth and is every single visible thing you can think of that wants to tear you limb from limb. And picture that. And now picture that you see that dog's foot's in a trap. And now all of a sudden, all of that snarling and frothing and snapping makes sense, right?
Right.
It's, and it's tough to maintain that sense of compassion, right? If you further that visualization and that metaphor, you might realize, I don't know that I can get that dog out of that trap. Right? I don't know that I can just reach over and hit a button. That dog might still come at me. I might still have to, I just might not be able to directly alleviate that suffering. I might only see the destruction and the fear in its eyes. And that kind of visualization awakens that same thought that we think of with things like addiction, and we think of with even people that are responding to trauma and responding to their own grief and their own loss with destructive behaviors or isolation or lashing out or anger or anything like that. When we see that, we might only be bearing witness to the things that kind of repel us, right?
Yeah.
We might only be seeing things that make us go, I'm not going around there anymore. I'm not calling anymore. I'm not texting anymore.
Sure.
That might be all we're seeing. And we've either lost sight of the foot that's in the trap, right? Or we just don't know it. We never take the time to remember it, like, damn, no wonder they're lashing out. That hurts.
Reminds me of the text your brother-in-law got.
Yeah.
The person wasn't ready to see the foot in the trap.
Yeah, not ready. Not ready.
He put it there.
Yeah.
Anyway. Shout out to Ian.
Yeah, love Ian. There is an aspect of working with any of this stuff, any of grief and loss and the different kinds of losses that pile up with addiction and stuff, where you might only be witnessing the behaviors that are hard to witness, and you're not getting as much of an opportunity to see the patient person, the loving person, the person you have inside jokes with, the person that you have really, really cute pictures with or funny pictures with. You might not be getting to see much of that.
The person before their foot got snarled by and I'm thinking of that TDS fucking bear trap. Yeah. Before that got them.
Yeah. And I just think that kind of that there's two sides to that. Like, one, we want to build up the compassion and the empathy to realize that what this suffering is kind of initiating in these people. And two, if we're grieving certain things, or maybe the person that we're talking about here is gone and we're grieving that loss, we want to understand our own humanity. Of course we backed away when somebody lashed out, right? Like, of course we got a little hesitant to engage when the last handful of times, we've gotten our hand slapped. Like, it's really, really hard to hang in relationship.
I'm still thinking of a buddy of mine who's, and I would say kind of struggling. He's struggling. He always reminds me of that. Remember that he was like, I came over to your house at one time and I was deep in rock bottom. He said that, the house smelled like cigs, and I was sitting there in my sweatpants and fucking drinking, smelled like sweat. And he always reminds me of how bad I look. And I'm
Paints
like,
a picture.
I'm like, what'd you do to fucking help me? He's like, I said, see you later.
Didn't get the vacuum cleaner out.
No, motherfucker.
Yeah.
He always reminds me of that too, about how bad it was. How I remember that time, and you didn't pay the power bill, so you were like blowing a box fan, and it was hot, and you were sweating, and you were fat. Yeah, I remember.
Where
motherfucker.
are we going? Where are we going?
Are you? Yeah. Did you get me a glass of water? Or he's like, I had to leave.
Yeah.
It was so bad, I had to leave. He says.
Yeah.
Sorry, I made you.
And that's both. I mean, that's both sides of it, right? Like, you're in hindsight, you're well aware
that fucker,
of what would have been relief, and you can't necessarily blame a human being for being like, I think I might have to get out of here.
This is not. He's certainly not qualified.
I might have to put my oxygen mask on first here.
Let me ask you this, because and kind of the back half of this episode, and maybe it could probably be its own series of episodes, but talk to me about the grief of a lost relationship, as in like girlfriend, boyfriend, lost love relationship, if I'm saying that right, whether it's a divorce or a broke up. I mean, you see kids go through devastating heartbreak in young ages and teens, and it's the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And it's coupled with, it's usually one person deciding to end it and the other person now also dealing maybe with a form of rejection. But I think we've all probably gone through it. I remember the first time I was really wrecked. In the beginning, it was sleepless heart, like that acute knife, similar to when, if it's in going through that, it's a form of grief, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's I mean, there's every kind of ambiguous loss you can think of, like a very intense exercise that Bob Niemeyer and Carolyn will put us through is like just it's something as simple as like, what have you lost? Not a fancy therapeutic intervention, just like you need to sit down and what have you lost? And when you think about the end of a relationship, you think about a divorce, a breakup, especially if there's family involved, there's kids involved, you're going to start thinking about home, a sense of home, certain losses of hope, right? Certain kinds of like, I thought this was going to be forever and it's not. You're also dealing with every kind of old attachment rupture and abandonment that you might have. Even if you come from a healthy background, this might be kind of the skeleton key to unlocking your greatest fears of abandonment. Abandonment is a massively painful form of ambiguous loss, even if the abandonment is not being done by an abandoner, even if it's somebody being like, this isn't going to work anymore.
Right.
And we're done. Like, that person isn't necessary. They're not abandoning you, right? Like, this is, adults are allowed to break up with adults.
Both can be true. Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
but you can feel a sense of abandonment.
Sure.
You can feel like this person, I thought they were always going to be here for me and they're not here for me anymore. I feel abandoned, right? That does not necessarily mean the person committed a form of abandonment. And so you name a lot of that as grief, similar to kind of acute stress and acute grief. There's times where when somebody's really going through a loss of relationship or divorce or something like that, and they're definitely not themselves. Same like any other kind of grief, right? Like they're not taking care of themselves the same way. They're not getting up, taking a shower, every day. They're not getting dressed for work the same way. They're not returning calls, texts, or, we kind of talk about like, let's put a little bit of parentheses around this period in your life and know that like, this is a period now where you're healing and recovering. When we're healing and recovering, we're not always going to be as functional as we want. And it's going to be afterward when we are back to some sense of what we're used to, right? Like when our hygiene's back up to normal, when the box fan is off,
right.
You know, when things are kind of back up to what maybe other people would describe us as, right? Like that's kind of a thing that shows up sometimes with people when they're going through it, is they have people say that they miss us.
Sure.
Right. And what they mean, they miss a sense of us. Right. They know, like, wait, this isn't Pondoff. I know Pondoff. You're not yourself. Right. So that will be back in some form or fashion. Not the same because it's lost, but that will be back in some form or fashion. So we try to put a little bit of parentheses around it and be like, yeah, this is like recovery. You don't have a sense of yourself, because when you're in a committed relationship, long-term relationship, anything like that, you are kind of accessing the other person's eyes to give you a sense of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which we do with parents to get in developmental psych and stuff like that. But like, you know, when you spend every day with somebody and it's the primary person you talk to, you're still kind of utilizing their eyes to give you a sense of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that ends, good, bad, or indifferent, you are suddenly thrown into the world of needing your own eyes for that sense of yourself. And a lot of times we're just not ready or equipped for that, and we got to build that from scratch.
Ash always hates when I tell a story about Tom because it's not his best advice. Sometimes he didn't give the best therapeutic wisdom.
No, he was funny with McKinnis.
Right, sure.
Yeah, we're going to stay with that one.
There was a time I was going through a little heartbreak, you know, and my answer was to drink it away, right? But I was going through a little heartbreak, and he's like, "You're fucking not over that shit yet?" I'm like, "No, I'm fucking heartbroken." And he said, "You're going to end up like this fucking neighbor guy I grew up with." I remember when I was a kid, this neighbor down the street, fucking old lady left him. So he drew a heart around his chest and fucking shot himself through the chest with a shotgun. He's like, "You're going to end up like him." He kept telling me because I was broke up. God,
we just undid the McKinnis story.
Fuck, it wasn't his best. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, that's, you know, there is a similar pressure. I think a lot of it
hates that story.
Oh, it's a terrible story. It's a terrible story. It's forever recorded. It's something where, similar to a lot of things associated with loss, we still will have times where we hope that we could do everything that we need to do alone. We still kind of, you know, I mean, even if you go through a loss of another person and now you're kind of in this mindset of, well, I don't really want to get close to any other people because I don't want the same thing to happen. Right?
Yeah,
A very kind of heavy-handed line of like, the person that I trusted the most and loved the most is now gone. And if I trust and love somebody like that again, I don't know that I can do this a second time. Right. And so when we are at the end of a relationship, let's say, that's a similar feeling where it's like, okay, I have to figure out how to never go through that again, right? That's our kind of survival instinct, right? Mm-hmm. This is unthinkably bad. I need to make sure I don't have to go through it again, which is not a bad thought in terms of making sense. It's just not real, right? Like we need people. Doesn't mean you have to be in a relationship again. If you are in a committed relationship and it ends and you say, well, I'm going to be single for the rest of my life, that's fine too. I mean, there's no judgment there.
Dog again.
Yeah, that's no judgment there. You're allowed to do whatever you want to do with your life in that regard. But there is a piece of it where
I can hear your lovely wife say if something were to happen to her that you need to be single.
Yeah, the orders would be that I'm on my own.
Yeah, and never smiling again.
Yeah, for the duration. And I think that's, you know, our first thought is we better figure out how to do this on our own. And that is where you'll see even some of your supports. If somebody goes through a breakup or a divorce, there's a couple of things. One, you're immediately getting this feedback that like, you don't need that person, which is not super helpful feedback in the moment because you're grieving the end of the relationship. Or you start getting some feedback, which is like, you just need another person.
Sure. Let's fill the gap.
Yeah. and so like both of those things.
God, that doesn't work either, man.
Well, it's another form of that unsettling aspect of grief, right? Of loss and change, where it's like, gosh, you've been unhappy about the end of this relationship for a time frame that I think is making me uncomfortable. So let's figure this out.
I was brokenhearted. My buddy Andrew, Andrew, he said, go get her best friend. That was his advice.
Yeah. I'm so glad that we're friends.
Right.
I mean, it's these people are just this terrible.
Andrew
advice.
was a great employee for you.
I like Drew. Of course, I like Drew.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, that it.
Well, it's weirdly, it's misguided, but not poorly intended. Again, right? It's like
make me feel better.
Yeah, it's a form of maybe not as helpful loyalty that is being shown, but I think
to fill in the gap. I sorry to cut you off. I have given that advice, not necessarily. Maybe I have to go get the best friend and get a little revenge. It just served best hot. I think how the saying doesn't go. I have been the guy we got to get this guy out to the rebounds. We got to get your mind off it. Get your mind in. And I don't think at one time that's been successful. Even is it the giver. I've been the receiver or the giver of the advice. It's because you're not. It doesn't do the grief any.
It's not providing for any kind of emotional process to unfold.
There you go. That's the profound way.
And something emotional still has to unfold, right. And it doesn't mean it's not a binary unfolding, right? It's not necessarily you must go into some kind of like monk's retreat until you are prepared for your next connection to the world. But it is something where, being able to just acknowledge there's an aspect of what I'm feeling surrounding a loss that doesn't feel very resolved, and just seeing where that takes you, and that can be anything, because there might be resentment there, and there might be anger there, and there might be just sorrow. It might just be, like Francis Weller says, it might just be your apprenticeship with sorrow for a little while. You're learning what you got to learn from sorrow. And that's the nonlinear, that's the no beginning, middle, and end kind of stuff where you're in it. And that apprenticeship, those feelings that are there that just kind of become the through line of a situation for a little while, that's just an unfolding. Like that's an unfolding. And to have one friend who says, don't be bothered by that anymore, it's not that big of a deal and you're better off now. And to have another friend that says, hey man, just work on yourself. Like that was not a great situation. And to have another friend who says, I know somebody that might be a great fit, right? We want to have a whole team full of people that are giving feedback. But we also need to respect that similar kinds of things play out with any kind of loss, when any kind of loss, when somebody dies, you're getting some version of like, well, don't worry, there's other people, you still have a lot of people around, or you
plenty
still
of fish in the sea.
Yeah. You still get a lot of that feedback. And so what we're looking for is we're always looking for that Goldilocks zone. What's that sweet spot between I can acknowledge and I can allow and I can feel these things, and I'm living in a world that's different. In grief, it's a lot of what they consider dual process, right? Like when somebody dies, I have a relationship with this person that is gone, and I have to operate in a world that they're not in, right? I got to do both things at the same time. Or like some of the grief people talk, like with Frank Ostaseski that wrote 5 Invitations, and Francis Weller. They will both talk about the idea that grief needs like container and release, and you can't really do both of those things for yourself. You need some place, some space that holds what you're feeling, and you need the opportunity to let the feeling kind of unfold a bit. If you try to provide your own container and your own release, it can have some pretty difficult results.
Looks like a plastic jug of rich and rare whiskey.
You're going to try that one.
Sure.
That was the hammer to most of your nails.
It sure was.
And so
swung and missed a couple times. I hear this in the time frame, but I go back to, I think it was second or third date. Ashley did look at me and ask, are you I need a serious answer. Are you hung up on any of your exes? She needed to know that
Sure.
that I had gotten to the point. I had felt, let the emotional process take its course before she were to proceed.
There's
and I said, no, I'm not. I'm just going to invite them all to our wedding.
yeah. There's one thing that and this is as good of a tying a bow on the end of today that we're going to have is that there's one thing that Ashley, that your lovely wife Ashley and my lovely wife Holly are both very good at, and I think of it through. I saw Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers live a bunch.
Oh yeah,
I really liked watching Petty and the Heartbreakers. I love Tom
I went
Petty.
to a concert at Riverport with our friend Cameron Hazlitt.
Love Cam.
And,
Shout out to Cam.
I was all dead set. The AC was out at the house, and I was in high school, and I couldn't even drive. Cam drove, who's probably never drank a drop in his life, but I was ready to have a party after the concert because my parents were getting a hotel room. And we got back, and I was inviting a couple people over, and it was 120 degrees in the house. And I was like, "We can't do this. We can't do this." And then we left. But that yeah, I did get drunk, but Cam didn't.
I love Petty, and the guitarist of the Heartbreakers is Mike Campbell.
Okay,
right. He's always been the guitarist, and I think it was like Guitar Magazine or whatever, the big publication in the guitar and rock world and all that, said that Mike Campbell was one of the only guitarist that had never wasted a note, that everything was just clean, right? There's not a lot of filler or anything like that. And you think about some of those riffs from the Heartbreakers that are classic.
I played Won't Back Down at Drug Church the other night.
Yeah, like they say, never wasted a note, right? And you telling that story about Ashley and then me thinking about my wife as well, it's like they have never asked a wasted question.
No,
it's always poignant. It's always exactly what we need to be talking about. It's always like, let's just this is, and also this is a yes or no,
right? Mm-hmm.
This is not like a dialogue. This is not a Socratic.
I know you're not going to the bathroom to think about it.
Yeah, she's not trying to get you to say something that she can answer ask a follow up. Like, and I think that that kind of direct skill is rare.
Sure.
And
surgical,
and you and I are both people that have the ability to be non-direct.
Yeah, I can dance around some things.
And we need the guardrails of a good question asker.
Yeah, like when she asked me to leave the house on Valentine's Day, Friday night, I was pretty bitter about that.
Yeah, but it was the right question.
Sure.
When are you leaving?
When are you leaving?
Was the right question.
What show are you and Charlie going to? The 6:30 or the 6:50?
Yeah.
Good show.
6:55 it was.
I can never see Nev Campbell again.
Yeah, that's going to be a long one.
Oh, boy.
But, so, yeah, I mean, the primary thing is like I said, is we kind of tie a bow on things. I just think that, and you had mentioned like the relationship stuff and continuing on, like the dialogue of where are these losses and how do these losses get managed and experienced and build compassion and empathy. And that's something we could talk about every week.
Yeah.
Until we decide it's out, because there's,
We don't depress everybody out there.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we're assuming positive intent. We're trying to keep on a bit of a positive side of things, but I do think that if anybody that sits down and listens to this is really navigating their own loss, if you have had any kind of loss, not a recent loss, doesn't have to be recent, it could be, like I said, it could be 50 years ago.
Yeah,
something went wrong. You have to be very kind of gentle with yourself in that. You have to know that if a feeling comes up and you go, damn, I can't believe it's been 20 years and that feels like it was just yesterday, like that's just a reminder to that call to a certain kind of tenderness that you have to have with yourself, because all of us are grieving something that we're not going to finish grieving. That it will reckon with us, and it will be a loss that changed us for the rest of our lives. And that is not a negative, cutthroat thing. That is just a point of experience that we just have to be really gentle and patient with.
Yeah. Two things as we wrap up. And the first one is something that just came to mind as we've been talking about this, because I've heard this, two people that I care about very deeply. They're going to two different phases of life. One's a divorce, and the other one is a boundary with a parent, like a real hard one.
Sure.
And I've heard both of them say it's like grieving someone who's still alive.
Yeah.
Which can happen, I think, inside the relationship.
Yeah. That's a great example of ambiguous loss.
Sure.
Like, I mean, this is not what you're talking about, but like Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Alzheimer's and dementia is you're grieving a relationship with somebody who has not passed yet. And
sure. Yeah. So that was, I was thinking about that, and then really to end, and not in a one word, but what if somebody out there is listening and they're in the car and like, this is me. I am feeling so broken with grief and or they're in the absolute, that acute knife gut of it. What is like one or two, somebody's out there struggling with addiction as they check into treatment.
Sure.
It's a big ask, right? I get it. That's a hard ask for somebody. It's probably what's needed, but that's a hard ask to go from 0 to 60. Like, I'm listening, I'm drinking, I need help. Call a treatment center. That's
Sure.
a hard ask. What would you say to someone? What simple, small step advice could you give someone out there that's listening that just lost their Tom or their Michelle, their Diego even? I mean, will never minimize the loss of a fucking pet, especially after going through it. And what would you say to them? Is it pick up the phone? What is it?
Well, I mean, I would say, as kind of a resource idea, you look at things in the area like HeartLinks is a really great resource.
What is
not
that?
Even to say, I mean, HeartLinks does a lot of grief work. They work a lot with kids. They work a lot with teens,
Sure.
but provide counseling that is like grief only. Like, if you're really going through a loss right now, if the primary thing impacting you is grief, one thing I would say is go somewhere, talk to somebody. Like I say, HeartLinks is a great example, but talk to somebody who talks about grief. There are still a lot of people out there that don't do a lot of talking about grief.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not the work that they do. Nothing wrong with that. It's just not really what they do. And so because if you connect with something like HeartLinks, you can also, then you're going to get plugged into different groups.
Sure.
And different grief support groups, very specific grief support groups, even things like, weavings and stepping stones and different things that are over in the St. Louis area that are camps and provide groups and everything. You really want to be able, if you can, to acknowledge in a very, very safe and intentional space that you're going through this loss. If you're not ready for that to be around other people, then of course I recommend individual therapy. I recommend talking to somebody who lists grief as a specialty, which would be on their Psychology Today. They would say that. So I was just going to
say that break, because that's what I think we need to break. Like, even that, I think people that have not ever, more times than not, I've brought people that therapy's not for me. I'm not going to call a therapist,
Sure.
Especially fucking guys, right? Break it down. Is it a Google? Do you Google?
Yeah, I mean,
what's a simple thing you can do to
the
make
nice
yourself...
thing about like therapy as an example is that if you go to Psychology Today, or
.com?
Yeah.
Or just Google Psychology Today.
If you Google therapist Belleville,
sure.
One of the first couple of links that's going to come up is Psychology Today, which does by zip code.
Okay.
They have a list of provider pages. Those people are going to list
what does that
their
look like?
Approach. So, it's name and credentials, right? So that's what as my dad says, the MICKEY behind a therapist name. So LCSW, LCPC, LMFT.
We call it an eye chart.
Yeah, PhD. Those things are there. So you're going to see that. There's what Psychology Today does well is you see it's got a picture. A lot of times there's a video. Okay. Somebody will have a 15-second, my name is blank. Even some people will post a video on there that is just like, hi, my name's Chaz, and I think it's important that you hear my voice if you're going to talk to me. So this is just a recording of my voice, right? Like, some people are not trying to sell
sure.
you. They're just kind of trying to give you some guardrails so you know what to expect. And then on that page, when you click on their profile, that's going to be towards the bottom of the profile. You're going to see if they take insurance, what insurance they take, what their out-of-pocket rates are, what their office hours are, what their website is, and then a big list of specialties and probably a big list of like modalities of therapy. So something like cognitive behavioral therapy, compassion-focused therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy.
So let me put a pause on you, because for the persons that I'm thinking of, that's a lot right there. And I think it's digestible. I think if somebody's right there says, if there's one thing I can do, I'm listening to this and I'm fucking hurting. My I feel like I'm getting gutted from the inside out. Google Psychology Today or Therapist in Belleville and get to the page and find the page and start scrolling.
Just start looking.
And I think that alone is a step, is a small baby step in the right direction to say, and you start realizing there's things out there that you're not alone. And then if you have questions on what modalities are, you can reach out to this podcast, you can Google it, but just start scrolling. And that, just the act of fucking rolling the ball on the mouse on that page is dipping a toe into the right direction.
What is really, really, really tough, like if you can't really think about like, what do I need? Right? Like a lot of us are very disconnected from our needs because a lot of us have been focused on other people, or we don't always know how to express ourselves safely. And you probably do have an idea of what you don't want.
There you go.
Even scrolling through something like Psychology Today and being like, oh, I don't relate to this. I don't relate to this description, right? You'll start noticing like, oh, I don't want somebody that uses this kind of language, but I'm noticing that like I've spent a little bit more time looking when somebody says that they're direct or they, that they really have like a certain kind of approach that you're relating to versus the ones where you're like, none of this. I don't like any of this. I don't like this one. I don't like this one. That's okay. Take stock of what you also don't like, because that means you're learning more about your emotional experience. And you'll start to narrow that down and you'll start to kind of funnel that a little bit. And then when you reach out, what's on there will be a number or an email. There's an option to, you could call them right there or you can email them right there. And that goes straight to them. It's and you'll, hopefully hear back. Like, I understand how hard it is to find a therapist. I understand that it's hard to find one. It's hard to find one that's a good fit. But when you start looking at, if you start Googling like grief therapy in my town, in my county or whatever, stuff is going to come up, and there are the people that work with grief are usually a pretty unique lot. They've really committed themselves to working with loss and all of its forms, many of them touched by pretty extreme loss.
Yeah.
And, and so just kind of anything you can do that plays a little bit of a role in reminding yourself that you don't have to do what you're doing alone is going to be a win.
I'm picturing like an old movie, and I think somebody loses a job and a relationship, and they're like bumming out on the couch for a couple days, and the sink's filling up with dishes, and the buffalo wing sauce is on the wife beater, and somebody comes over and says, here's the newspaper, start going through the classifieds for jobs.
Sure.
And then like the scene of them finally making that first step is there's a couple red X's on the newspaper of the job in the classifieds that either they've called or doesn't fit for them. But even that got them from the couch in their boxers and wife beater to the kitchen table to the phone. And it's little small steps like that can be fucking life altering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether it's addiction, whether it's grief, any of this stuff, it starts to get you unstuck, man.
Yeah. There's no such thing as an insignificant step, right? You can never incrementalize things too small. Yeah. It's kind of the mathematical idea that there's like, infinite numbers between 0 and 1, right? Like there's nothing that is too incremental. And I think that even something like, I've mentioned some names on here like Francis Weller and Meg Devine and Robert Niemeyer.
Joan somebody.
And so like Joan Halifax.
Yes.
And
thinking of Sidney Crosby.
Even looking at something like Like it's okay, you're not okay.
Pride of Nova Scotia.
Yeah, of course. Halifax is time. Yes. Even looking at something like it's okay, you're not okay. Right. Grabbing a book that is, Meg Devine, who is a longtime therapist, she was a domestic violence therapist and was experiencing a lot of burnout and was thinking about leaving the field. She went home and told her partner that, they had the conversation where her partner was like, yeah, it's time for you to be done. Take a break. I'll make the money. We'll tighten the belt wherever we have to, and you can take that break. And 2 days later, he drowned in front of her.
Oh, fuck.
And, and so Meg's backstory gets it, gets it, that, and I've, been on Zoom with Meg speaking and giving a training and everything. She's a powerful force, but like even saying, well, let me look up Meg Devine, and it's okay. You're not okay. But,
just the search engine hit alone.
Yeah. Like when Anderson Cooper talks about losing his mom, he's got a whole grief podcast now. Anderson Cooper does. Right. But like Anderson Cooper found the book, we read the book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller, and said he basically underlined the whole thing. And it was just a massive part of his early grief.
God, that's actually in that fucking red book.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. I mean, just that, because like that, anything that is allowing you to feel like you are kind of building some space and curiosity for your experience rather than thinking I only want this to end, right? I only want what I'm feeling to stop. Anything that allows you to think that you can start kind of pulling a little bit of the thread on this feeling and making it kind of a part of your experience, that's going to be big. Mm-hmm. There's nothing too small. If you read a little bit of it's okay, you're not okay. And that's the thing that allows you to maybe search on Psychology Today,
right.
and you watch some Meg Devine videos or listen to her podcast, and I believe she's in her 50s, and you say, well, maybe I'll look up some female therapists in their 50s because I've been reading this Meg Devine book, and it would maybe be like a safe step for me. Like there's nothing too incremental. Because to go all the way back, when you're dealing with loss, you're going to notice that there was no interaction with someone, let's say, that you've lost that is now too small, right? Mm-hmm. You're gonna remember the way that they held a fork.
Yeah.
You're gonna remember what they, that they like Diet Pepsi with their dinner, like you're going to remember all these things, and you're going to realize that nothing was too incremental. Nothing is too incremental in your own path of trying to build relationship with yourself and cope with what you're feeling. There's nothing too small there. So take those steps.
As you're saying that, I keep thinking is that small step that like there's nothing too incremental to take in one direction. Once you take that really small step, that incremental step in that positive direction, looking back, it's a gigantic monumental step that you would never want to take backwards.
Yeah.
Like once you get to the kitchen table and are crossing off the classified ads, you don't want to go lay back on the couch and undo that. That's a step forward you don't and can't really undo. And once you add those small incremental steps up, it might be a day or two and you're already a light year further than being on the couch with dishes in the sink and depressed with a bottle.
And just giving yourself the opportunity to take that incremental step and know that depending on what we're talking about with any kind of loss or change or suffering, knowing that you might take that first step and realize, wow, it took me a day to recover from that step.
Yeah.
I read 5 pages of that book and it knocked me back. And you're just kind of learning your own tolerance. You're learning what it takes to recover from taking care of yourself. And that recovery after that effort is just as important. You're learning more and more about what you got, what's in the tank. And so
that's good, man.
Yeah. Hopefully somebody need to hear that.
Amen. All right. Well, thanks again. And I'm sure it'll hit. We'll land the plane. Check out Light Source. Great referrals if you're full. Yeah. Call Evan if you need some insurance. All the information's on there. Support the sponsors. If you can, Heart Links is a good thing to Google.
Yeah.
That's a great resource. And Chaz has, again, rattled off about 60 authors that I've never heard of. And you can write down as you're going through.
They're all great.
If he's recommending them, there's no question about it. So, as you said, we all hope you needed to hear that.
Yeah.
Take care.